You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, music lovers, and welcome to Modern Musicology. We are glad to have you aboard. My name is Alan, and with me is Rob Levy.
Hey, what's up?
Anthony Williams.
Howdy.
And Stephanie Seymour.
Hi, people.
Okay, this week we are back, continuing on with our topic from last week's episode of the albums of 1988. This week we're covering the second half of the year, starting in June. And if you want to listen along with what we're talking about, go check out our Spotify playlist where we have a song from each album that we're discussing in the order in which we're discussing them. So it's easy to follow along. It's one song per album that sort of exemplifies that album. So go check that out. Okay, so May was an immense month, but look at all the stuff that came out in June.
I've got a very unexpected shout out, something I don't think any of you would in a million years expect me to be shouting out.
Oh, can we guess?
And that is, you can guess.
No, there's too many to pick from. Go ahead.
Paula Abdul, Forever Your Girl.
Oh, I knew that would be on Stephanie's list.
No, it's not.
It's not.
It's on Anthony's list.
Crazy.
Straight Up is one of my favorite 80s tracks that's not metal. It makes it onto every single 80s playlist I put together for a party. I fucking love that track. So, Paula, I see you. I also want to say June, Pantera released their final album with their glam sound. Thank God. And that's what I'm going to say about that.
Right.
Paula and Pantera.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even a good shout out for Pantera.
Yeah.
Well, that's the month that It Takes Two came out.
Right.
Rob Bass.
The 12-inch for the Eazy-E and Rob. Yeah.
Oh,
It Takes
because
Two.
I had that for August. I'm sorry. It Takes
Well,
Two.
the 12-inch came out.
Ah, shit.
The 12-inch hit. It broke as a 12-inch, and then it went.
It did.
It just exploded. Yeah. And this is important because this is when you start to see. You'd seen Young MC and Tone Loc and things sort of break into clubs, but when It Takes Two hit, it was it really opened the door for the merger of black hip hop and black soul and the very, very white homogenized dance clubs, right?
Yes.
Particularly in the UK, because this changed everything. It would influence the whole hacienda sound. You'd get a guy called Gerald a couple months later. You'd get, New Order had a big trippy dance record later that this was kind of an influence on. So yeah, that, and I think the big dog, which I think is also on your list, Steph, is It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back.
I mean, that's one of my two favorites, I think, of the year. It's this album and Stetsasonic. But yeah, I keep coming back to the words a sonic bomb to describe this album because it was so powerful. Again, another album with immense political and social commentary and really revolutionary kind of ideas. And Chuck D was just a tour de force. The delivery in his voice is magic. And I really think it's one of the best albums of all time. NME actually said that it was the greatest hip hop album ever. I mean, they might have changed, their mind after, more things came out afterwards. But it was just, there's not a bad song on that album. There's so many crazy great songs. And it's so it's such a long album. You have song after song after song that just hitting you. Like Don't Believe the Hype, Cold Lampin' with Flavor, Night of the Living Bassheads, Party for Your Right to Fight, Mind Terrorist. I mean, they're just boom, 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 boom. And
yeah.
Right, and you could feel that album in your soul, I feel,
Yeah. It's also, too, a record that really, from the college end, challenged a lot of programmers because they're like, all right, I'm putting a rap record in. because we felt like you had to do something with it, but you didn't know what. It was impossible to ignore by anybody. You know, this is around the time the PMRC's in full gear too, right? So this record firmly scared the shit out of white people. I mean, and that was
100%.
that's a fantastic thing. I mean, the best thing you could do to like adolescent college kids in 1988 is tell them something might scare the shit out of their parents, man. They sold more records to white kids with this record, I think. And this is the beginning of like hip hop really being political and seen as dangerous, right?
Oh yeah, like
before it was kind of fun,
yeah,
but now it's not fun
because
anymore.
later in the year you're gonna get NWA, which we've already talked about in this show. But yes, I mean, yes, this was, you're right, PMRC or PRMC, what is it?
Whatever.
Yeah. I mean, they were on top of it, like, you know, no one's business.
There are 3 specific records this year that they went after really hard.
Yeah.
They're all within this 3-month span.
Yeah.
And it's like they only listened to records during this 3 months, right? Yeah, this thing hit like a bomb. We did not know what the hell to do with it, where to program it. I probably got 12 to 15 cuts on my fingers, recording it onto a reel-to-reel, and then splicing out all the curse words so that we could put that onto a cart for like a radio-friendly thing. And this is one of the first things I would saw on vinyl where they released like a single with like a radio edit. This kind of launched the radio edit because this record was just so in demand, and people were like, well, I want to play this record, but
need a clean version. Yeah.
And so they very playfully did a radio edit for some of the songs, not all of them. They were pretty uncompromising with it, but it did change the game. I think it's the single most important record of the year.
Definitely, you talk about hip hop at this point becoming more political, and for me, this is where hip hop is really interesting. I think hip hop needs to be saying something, and what we've had in more recent times, where a lot of hip hop has taken on the kind of excesses that I more traditionally associated with the glam metal scene, right? The whole guns, bitches, and bling thing, right? No, thank you.
No.
But this is interesting. I like this era of hip hop a lot.
Yep. Agreed. Can I talk about my favorite album of the year, Stetsasonic, In Full Gear? This is Stetsasonic's second album, In Full Gear, on Tommy Boy, one of the hottest labels at the time. You know, again, different styles of hip hop. This is a sort of pure, like, energy, bravado in the most endearing kind of way. Great lyrics, great rhymes, a diverse sound, like each band member taking turns with verses. You know, it's really in your face, but it's got a lot of layers going on. They're really considered one of the acts that pioneered kind of like jazz and rap together with like beatbox, sampling, and mix of styles of like R&B and dance hall and jazz. I mean, they just put everything together in one huge mixing pot and came out with just every single song on this album is amazing. And I would go to the clubs and hear this stuff coming on, and it would drive the crowd wild. You know, when you heard like DBC Let the Music Play, it just 4 little lines encompassed the whole feeling of the scene, which is so break out the champagne, pop the cork, the year's 88, the town New York, the crowd is loud and everything's okay, DBC Let the Music Play. It was just like people were going bananas. So I don't know. They also had like every member of the group produced different songs on the albums, which is really a weird thing at the time. It was kind of cool. They sampled James Brown, they sampled Sly and the Family Stone a lot, but they also had like live drummer when they played live, and they were just such a powerhouse group. I love this album so much to my very core. It's one of my favorite albums of all time.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to just super, super quick. I do want to close out June by talking about a film that came out that year, and that is Decline of Western Civilization, Part 2, The Metal Years, which we've talked about a couple of episodes back on our metal show with Matt Oshbach. A really important film that captures that LA scene with the hair metal bands and the determination to make it, and the oversaturation of the scene of all these bands who all want record contracts, and not all of them are going to get them. and it's just a great film, and it is really eye-opening.
Yeah, that's a great movie. Everyone should see that.
Totally. We talked about some of the hip hop stuff, and there's another one coming up later this year talking about the social commentary and the really uncompromising look at what inner city life is like. And then to counterbalance that, coming out on July 1st is the 5th album by the Fat Boys, coming back hard again. Now, the Fat Boys had made kind of their stock in trade, taking old soul and rock songs and making rap songs out of them. So they did Jailhouse Rap and Sex Machine and Wipeout. And so with their 5th album, they come out with The Twist, which they had Chubby Checker on. He sang with them on the song. Louie Louie. So they're still doing that same thing and having huge success with it. This album either went platinum or double platinum, I think. So they're really rolling. But they also have a song called "Are You Ready for Freddy," which became the closing theme for that new Freddy Krueger movie, which we've already talked about a couple of times in the last episode. So, the Fat Boys are just doing their own thing, and they are still doing that fun element of hip hop when other bands like NWA are really getting dark and gritty and telling the truth and not pulling any punches.
That's why I just love this whole year, because you just get such a mix. It's great.
All right, who's got some July?
There are 2 albums released on consecutive days that I just want to give a shout out to, because they are so different, and I kind of love the contrast between them. So on July 4th, you had Kylie Minogue's debut album. Of course, I Should Be So Lucky, I think of as being the kind of pinnacle of the Stock Aitken Waterman sound.
Yes.
And then the very next day, July 5th, just to swing the pendulum in a totally different direction, Slayer with South of Heaven.
Yeah, baby.
Kylie and Slayer.
There you go, Kylie and Slayer. And specifically on that Slayer album, I'm not a huge Slayer fan, but they did a cover of Judas Priest's Dissident Aggressor that is just insane.
Yeah.
It's got such, I mean, the original had more aggression than you normally saw in the metal scene in the 70s, and Slayer being Slayer, they just amp it up. It's great.
Well, for even further contrast, also on July 5th, Crowded House, Temple of Low Men. Holy cow, I love this album so much. Better Be Home Soon was the big single from it, but there's so much good material on this album. I think that they created some of the best pop rock music of that time. Into Temptation is one of my favorite Crowded House songs. I Feel Possessed is so great. Kill I is so good. I mean, it's just you can't go wrong with that entire album.
You can't. And I can't believe that wasn't even, how did I forget that album on my
I thought
list?
you were going to bring it up, so I took it off my list.
So, yeah, I'm glad Alan brought it up, because it really is one of the greatest albums they even put out.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's July 5th or not, but I had The Indescribable Wow by Sam Phillips down, which I think, Steph, is one of the first records. I thought it was the first record you worked at Virgin, but then I just realized we just talked about it a lot.
Yeah, because I only worked the, Martinis and Bikinis album by her. I might have been an intern over at Virgin when Indescribable.
And that's the one I'm thinking of. I'm guessing, but I just remember you and I, at least when this came out in real time, had kind of talked about it.
Yeah.
Because I'd never heard of Sam Phillips before this, and it's really fantastic.
Well, she was more like doing Christian music beforehand. Yeah, under Leslie Phillips, I believe, which was her, not Sam Phillips. She was going by Leslie.
Yeah,
which might be her real name. I don't really know, but yeah. Alan, I think we share another release that Pat Benatar, right?
I bet we do.
Yeah. Pat Benatar.
Yeah.
Wide Awake in Dreamland.
Yeah.
What a good album. So good. This is her 7th studio album, and she's still cranking out the hits. I mean, I just love the song One Love. It's so beautiful. Yes. It's got such a good vibe, and I love it. Let's Stay Together, a real kind of just super cool, like, I don't know how to describe what Neil's doing on the guitar with the strings. He's kind of muting them, but he's like strumming them like they're a rhythm, And it's just really, I don't know. I just love this whole album. All Fired Up, great song.
All Fired Up is like a Pat Benatar powerhouse song.
Yeah.
There's 2 songs on side 2 that I love. Cool Zero and Cerebral Man are fantastic. My favorite Pat Benatar song ever is on this album, and it's called Too Long a Soldier.
Oh,
It
okay.
is one of the I don't know the story behind it. I don't know what the inspiration was for it or who it's written about, but it's really powerful. And another thing about this album is this is when the drummer, Myron Grumbacher, really starts to, he's always been involved in the songwriting of the band. He'd usually have like a song per album or something, but he
Yeah.
really gets into it this year. And he and Neil, he's got at least half of the album are Myron Grumbacher
Mhm.
co-writes. So you feel him all over the album, and I think it really changes the dynamic of it and changes the sound of the band.
Yeah. This was a little bit of a different sound, but this also, I feel like this was kind of her last really kind of hard rockin' kind of album.
It was, because right after this they did a blues album,
Yes, right.
and it did not do well. I wouldn't say it tanked, but it didn't do well because radio wouldn't play it because they're like, it doesn't sound like Pat Benatar.
Right.
So it wasn't real, and they never really had another big success after that. So,
Yeah.
The blues album is really good, but maybe they should never have done it.
Right. I know. It's like, but at this point, I think she could have done whatever she wanted to, right? It's her, she was so big
Yeah.
that she just did what she wanted to after that. Oh,
Basically, yes. August. Who's got some August picks?
All right, Rob, go for it.
So Sparks released Interior Design, which they've released like 9,000 times since then in 9 different versions. Not a record that's necessarily known as their best, but it's an interesting record that upon hindsight, a lot more people are starting to listen to again. It's certainly one that when people are talking to the band now on this tour, they're saying, oh, play some stuff from this record. It's got Madonna on it. Not Madonna the person, but the song Madonna. It's got some other interesting stuff on it. And every year should have a Sparks record.
And I'm going to be honest, Rob, it's not one that I give much thought to.
I didn't either. I've only really started listening to a lot of it. I mean, I've had it, but I until this last tour, I probably only listened to it maybe once a year, if that. But there were some people at the show that kept talking about it. There was one guy who was a music writer who's writing an essay for a music journal about it. And then I'd heard the band kind of talk about in an interview, what's the album that people are requesting songs from? And they're kind of like, so it's kind of one of those records that's kind of coming back into vogue, but I don't know if it's because the band overall is, or it's just because I'm missing something. But I've been listening to it a little more. It's still not their finest thing. It's a little uneven, but it's got some really great moments on it, and it Sparks. We also had talked about the PMRC earlier. And if you think they love Public Enemy, boy, they love them. They friggin' love them. Some Jane's Addiction, nothing shocking.
that's one of my huge picks too. Yay!
And yeah, feel free to talk about it. It's the perfect fusion of like alternative rock and metal.
Yes.
It was a great record for me as a music director at the time to play, because my guys that were DJs that always wanted to hear something hard were like, oh my God, this is the greatest friggin' thing ever, right? It really walked the line with 2 or 3 different genres, right? And it's still a powerhouse. It's an amazing record.
It is insane. It's a monster. Like Ocean Size, Had It Had, Idiots Rule. Just there's so many amazing tunes on this. Dave's guitar work is fantastic.
Oh my God. Yeah, he shreds.
Like shredding. And there's I feel like a little personal connection to this album because like in the New Music Seminar 1987 it was, my friend Denise and I met them. We went to see them play at the Ritz. This is when they had I think they had maybe released their indie, the first record that they basically put that out themselves as an indie release. But so we became friends with Steven and David for a while, like for some few years. And then to see them kind of just build and all of a sudden really start getting attention, it was very nice to, it was a really cool thing to see. And man, that album slams. Mountain Song, come on. Ted just admitted there's so many great songs on that album. And you're right, the PMRC
about
really
Ted.
love them.
Until I revisited that this week, I completely forgot about Ted. Just admit it. It's like, oh my God, this is great. Yeah.
Also, speaking of PMRC, what about NWA? This is the month.
I was going to bring them up.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
I think straight out. I mean, in this year, you have that Public Enemy album and that NWA album. I mean,
Yeah.
this comes back to what you were saying, Stephanie. Golden Era, two of the greatest hip hop albums of all time.
Yep. Hands down.
Right.
And this is an album that the FBI was writing letters of warning about, warning people about this group. They're dangerous. They're politically dangerous. I mean, it wasn't just, the women of the PMRC, they were really causing angst among
Oh my God, yes.
federal agencies,
Yeah, I got called into an office with the dean about this record, with the DJ who played it, who took the time to edit it, and it almost got us shut down.
Wow, I bet. I mean, MTV banned Straight Outta Compton video. Like they were getting banned all over the place.
And until anybody we had run it for like 2 weeks before anybody said anything about it, right? But it's just one of those records that's so incendiary and volatile, but yet so socially important at the time, right? Because as someone that listened to, a lot of indie records and listened to a lot of soul and stuff and was pretty aware of the civil rights movement, but not completely, right? This of the PE record really made me start to think about a lot of, socioeconomic, urban kind of stuff. And it really brought a whole new way of thinking about pop music. I mean, there wouldn't be a Rage Against the Machine if there wasn't this record, right?
Yeah, no, definitely.
It really sort of changed a lot of how radio stations played records. It also changed how records got reviewed. It sort of made MTV think about what they were doing. And it also put a lot of retailers in peril.
Yeah.
Because I remember at the record store, it was in a paper bag, taped over, marked new NWA album.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in some places, you had to go to a counter and get it because people were stealing it. At the Peaches Records, you had to go to the counter to buy it and show an ID.
Oh wow!
Right. And this is before. I mean, people were like freaking out about this. I mean, I remember thinking when I heard this, is like, is this what it was like with Elvis?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, but I mean,
yeah. This is also the album that sort of like started the West Coast, East Coast rivalry. I mean, this was like LA album, and they were talking about LA issues. Let's just also say that all of the things we said are true, and also there were amazing songs on this album. They were just great. Express Yourself, Straight Outta Compton, Fuck the Police is a great song. It's just a good. You want to sing it, you want to move to it. They're just great songs too.
And I think the reason for that is that the whole album has a very strong sense of classic funk.
Yes.
I've always thought that it sounded like a modern funk album. And it wasn't until later on when I started to actually kind of look into it that I realized that this thing is littered with samples of James Brown songs and Funkadelic and the Ohio Players. And even bands like Kool and the Gang, so Richard Pryor, they sample like one of his comedy routines. So it has that embrace of its heritage, at the same time doing something brand new with it. And I think that is the strongest element of that album. It's a brutal album, but at the same time, it builds on that foundation of the music that came before it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of gangsters, I should talk about something that has nothing to do with gangsters. Sunshine on Leith came out this month, which unleashed the eternal hell that is I'm Gonna Be 500 Miles upon the world. The best song on it, though, is called Then I Met You. This is a month we get that. And if you think you hear it everywhere now, man, when that thing came out, I literally locked myself in the studio so I wouldn't have to hear it. Because my DJs kept playing it. We also get the very first EP from My Bloody Valentine. The Pixies took them on tour with them.
Yes.
And they released My Bloody Valentine. And it is the noisiest gear shift change ever because they were kind of like a straight up pop kind of light sort of British kind of like neo folk band, right? I mean, they played like indie folk kind of like nice twee kind of stuff. And then this comes out and literally your ears bleed.
Yeah, it's like wall of sound.
They would put out another record later in the year, but this thing is just a beast. And it kind of solidified Creation Records as the it label,
Yeah.
which is going to be really important going into 89 and 90.
I have a couple of albums I want to talk about this year, or this month. Lots for this year. Helloween with Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 2.
I knew that would be on your list.
That's a great record. I think
Yes.
it's better than Part 1, which came out the year before. It probably has Helloween's most famous track, I Want Out, which I'm not even going to try to sing the chorus of that because my voice cannot go as high as Michael Kisk's. But just that whole album is great, and it's really kicked off the whole power metal genre as it is known today. I mean, I Want Out specifically has been covered by like Hammerfall and Sonata Arctica and Gamma Ray. All of those bands big in that entire subgenre. It's just so influential. And, I think it was the last album Kai Hansen played on with them before he left. Really, really big fan of that. And then the other one is the first Danzig album, which of course spawned Mother.
Yeah.
So he went solo from Misfits and put out this really, really great album with his incredibly unique voice.
It is unique. Well, then let's step on into September. We've got a new Metallica album, and
Where's the
Justice
bass?
for All.
Where's the bass, guys?
Right. Which I think we did a glancing mention of last week's episode, but Anthony, what you got to say about that one?
I think I said all I have to say.
Okay.
Seriously, you bring in a new bassist and then you don't really, you mix him so far down. I get it that they were mourning Cliff.
Yes.
But they did my guy Jason dirty.
No, I agree. I love Jason. I think he was a great addition to the band, and he brought so much to it. You just couldn't really hear it. You didn't really get it until you saw him live. But there's some great songs on there. So, it's not all bad.
That's the album with Blackened on as well, and Blackened is great.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, One comes off of that album.
Yeah,
which arguably was their earliest kind of MTV hit.
Yes,
it was exactly right. Same day as that, though, Susie and the Banshees, Peep Show, which I really love.
Yeah.
Yes.
Peekaboo, Killing Jar, great stuff.
Last Beat of My Heart.
Yeah.
Kind of a forgotten Susie record too. Everyone thinks of the first two or three, and they kind of forget that one.
Yeah, I agree.
It kind of The Cure really helped get Susie played in America, and Peekaboo when that thing hit in dance clubs and everything, it was full on for Susie.
Mm-hmm. I think this was a weird month of releases. I have a few that sort of just don't have anything to do with each other, but
yes.
that were interesting and big. Tom Waits, we had again on Island. It was big time. He released, which is basically like a live album. So that was like one kind of cool thing that came out there this year. Then on a real poppy kind of note, Bon Jovi released New Jersey, which was absolutely, huge for them. I like the album and I think it's good, but I don't know. It's very commercial, very poppy, whatever. But then there's stuff like Anthrax, State of Euphoria that came out that month also, which is, again, another release that we put out on Island that I had the pleasure of promoting. I don't know, Rob, if I ever called you about that one, but probably
you did. Actually,
you're a metal guy.
We did actually rent it because we put it in regular.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Fishbone had a great album out that
year. Oh my God, Truth and Soul is still amazing. Yeah. John Cusack's favorite record of all time, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting trivia. It's
still great. You get Ma and Pa.
Freddie's Dead.
Alan had talked a little bit about funk in the NWA record. There's funk all over that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think you kind of get in this year between Living Color and the Fishbone and the NWA, you kind of get this sort of like resurgence of the influence of funk. Like people are starting to look at it differently.
Yeah.
That record though is it's still fantastic. It's probably the best thing they've done.
Yeah, I really love that album.
Yeah, it's really good.
And the last thing I was going to mention for the month was possibly my favorite Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds album, which is Tender Prey. And it's, and it's funny because as I researched this album and just, certain information, I came across the fact that Nick Cave himself did not like this album. He's not a fan of this. I think he thought there was just like some bad production, bad performances, wasn't in the headspace, and that it's sort of all over the place. But my God, I love this album so much. The Mercy Seat is a great song. Deanna is one of my favorite songs by him. City of Refuge. And there's just so many good songs on it. And I can't figure out why he doesn't like it, but just shows what
Maybe
I
you'll
know.
get the chance to ask him sometime.
Yeah.
The Mercy Seat is pretty incredible.
Oh yeah.
Man, it's
Johnny Cash covered that song.
yes, he did. Taking this in a completely different turn, They Might Be Giants released Lincoln, and Anna Ang was on that record, which was everywhere in 120 minutes. You couldn't turn on that 120 minutes without freaking They Might Be Giants on. That record sort of just broke them literally before Flood, but that set everything up. They toured like crazy on that record. We also get Billy Bragg's Workers Playtime. I think it's his fourth album. Yeah. Which has got some interesting stuff on it. You get Bluebell Knoll from the Cocteau Twins, which is kind of a little bit forgotten, but Carolyn's Fingers is on that record. It's pretty good. And there's not really a way to contextualize how Elizabeth Fraser fits in 1988, other than that voice is amazing. And there's not really a voice like it anywhere making a record that year, except maybe Dead Can Dance. Mark Allman put out a solo album, The Stars We Are. It's probably the first solo album he made that was really commercially successful because he had Tears When Rings on it. And then he made a record with Gene Pitney. He covered Something's Got a Hold of My Heart with Gene Pitney, and it went like massive all over the world. And that was on 120 minutes. And then it started getting all these youth kids running out buying Gene Pitney records, which was kind of weird. And you also get Skinny Puppy with Vivisection 6 or Vivi, whatever the hell I call that thing, which is probably, again, part of that industrial thing that we're going to get more of next in the next month. But you're getting some really loud sounds. And that record sort of also kind of fused a lot of like metal and electronic elements together. You're kind of starting to see this build a little more. October, I'll piggyback off the Skinny Puppy. How about that? And that's Ministry, The Land of Rape and Honey.
Yeah.
Also a big hit with the PMRC. Just an incendiary record that sounds nothing like the Ministry records before it. If you'd listened to Ministry up until that point and turned it on, yeah, you're like, what is this? But it's pretty amazing. It's still probably one of the greatest concert experiences I've ever had, because on that tour, they put a steel fence in front of the stage and they had trash cans on fire. And basically the whole premise is if you wanted to, you couldn't slam, but if you wanted to throw people onto the fence, I went with a couple kids from school and I made it a point to wear my steel toes, and it was all on, man. Any grudge you had against any other kid in that pit, that is the nastiest pit I've ever been in.
That's horrible.
One of the loudest shows I've ever been in. And I've never seen a singer like just viscerally like taunt his audience into violence like that before.
Wow.
But that record is just so angry and loud. And yeah, it's probably one of the 5 loudest things I've ever seen. Also, that's the month that we get the incredibly relevant Daydream Nation from Sonic Youth too, which I think is probably their big moment. I wasn't really aware of Sonic Youth until I turned on 120 minutes and Kevin Seals going on and on and on about Daydream Nation for like 20 minutes. And I'm like, really? And I played it. And I'm like, wow, this is great. It's got the album cover that's a famous work of art. It's got all this other stuff going on. This is the month of the very first Stone Roses single that comes out, Elephant Stone. I think that's the first one, but that drops. So it was a precursor. The Laws released There She Comes.
Yeah, what a good.
There She Goes. Yeah.
There She Goes.
Which would be, until Stephanie Seymour recorded There Is a Time, would be the biggest earworm of the century. And another 120 minutes record, I Am Curious Orange. That was my first foray into the fall. Man, I didn't get the fall at first. Did you, Steph?
Oh, I don't get the fall anyway, so.
I only get like 2 or 3 records from them, but this is one of the ones that I get. It's probably the most commercial one that they made. We also get Introspective from the Pet Shop Boys, which has Domino Dancing on it, which is their last big single, sort of the last stand of them being a hit. But it's big because it does 2 things. It introduces the concept of a remix record, which Stock Aitken and Waterman would just run with after this. And then it also, by putting like Frankie Knuckles on it and some other people, it sort of takes house music into pop stuff. And you start to see all these house music guys producing pop records. And you get that over the next couple of years.
Well, there's another, we talked about one of the bands that had a big change of sound, and there's another one, October 18th, Duran Duran put out Big Thing,
Yep.
which was a huge shift in their style. A couple of big singles, I Don't Want Your Love, was a good one. All She Wants Is, and I liked those, but I thought there were some album tracks that I thought were far stronger. The title song is excellent. And then the couple of side two songs, Too Late Marlene and Palomino.
Oh,
great songs. Great songs.
That's another one of those records that sort of people go back and kind of like realize now that it's much better than it was when they got it. That's a fun record. I Don't Want Your Love is probably like one of the catchiest Duran singles when I think of Duran Duran. That's just sort of like across the board a pop earworm thing.
Mm-hmm. My October album that I would have to say is my number one October album is Rattle and Hum. Again, another album that I was promoting at Island. I love this album, and I know it's sort of not, I mean, a lot of people think it's like some pretentious kind of piece of crap, and I know he has a huge ego. I do understand that. I can see why people would think that. But I just think this album's really good, and I love Angel of Harlem. I love When Love Comes to Town with B.B. King. Yep. It's fantastic. God Part 2.
I love that one too.
God Part 2 is amazing. That's the one I would have released as a single. That's one we ran, actually.
It was a single, I believe. Live version of Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For with the gospel choir. That's so awesome. So I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of, like, again, people didn't love it, but some people did. And it was a very big commercial success, obviously. So
it also has Van Diemen's Land on it, which I think is a horribly neglected U2 song.
Yeah. It's another one.
But I liked Angel of Harlem. I thought it was just catchy enough, and it was
great.
It's got enough jangles and stuff in it that it really works.
His vocal performance is great on that.
I really do like Desire.
Mm-hmm.
And the live version of one of my favorite U2 songs ever, Bullet the Blue Sky, is exceptional.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I can think of in October was the Bangles with Everything. And this is the last album that they did with Michael Steele on bass, which is kind of sad because I always loved her songwriting and her vocals. And she has a couple of great songs on this one, Complicated Girl and Glitter Years, which is about the heyday of the Bowie and the Mark Bolan era of glitter rock. And Vicky and Debbie Peterson have a great song called Bell Jar, which is about Sylvia Plath, who wrote the novel Bell Jar. And then Vicky did a weird co-write with Vinnie Vincent, who was no longer in Kiss. And they did a song called Make a Play for Her Now, which is really good and very different style for Vinnie. And I always want to know how those two hooked up and what that song came from. I never really understood it, but I'd love to know the story behind it.
This is also, just think of how huge this album was with Eternal Flame and In Your Room. I mean, really, it was Eternal Flame that was the huge hit. I mean, it made them massive stars, I think. But I don't know. It's not my favorite Bangles album, but I do think it's really good.
Also in November, we have a great REM album, Green.
Yes.
Orange Crush, World Leader Pretend, Turn You Inside Out. I love those songs.
Hair Shirt.
Yeah. There's some singles that I didn't like as much.
This really got a lot of flack for being, I mean, this was when they signed to Warner, and they got a lot of flack for basically kind of like people saying they sold out. But you know what I say? I say, fuck that, because they had 5 albums where they're like paying their dues and they're making, these great albums, and they finally get a freaking hit. Good for them.
This doesn't really sound like a sellout album either. It sort of sounds like a continuation.
It's just because of Stan. That's why people are like, oh, Stan,
exactly.
But like, this album is kick ass. World Leader Pretend. I love the Untitled. The last song is called Untitled. I mean, this is just like, whatever. It's another thing of like people just
Yeah.
whining, you know? Come on. It's a great album.
To our great shame, November 1988 is also the month that unleashed Milli Vanilli upon the world.
I'm glad you brought that up because
It wasn't released in the U.S. until the following year, but it was released other places around the world. And, you know, I don't think we need to. I think if we say any more about that, we have to have other people say it for us. if anybody gets that joke.
having that in the Bros record come out the same year is pretty much hell. We also got, and Steph can relate to this as well, but this is the year Nana Cherry broke, right? And Buffalo Stance, that thing was everywhere.
Yeah.
I love that song.
That song is amazing.
Yeah.
Her laugh in it is like the best.
I know. Yeah, that's a great song.
I have it on one of my 80s playlists. I love it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. The whole album's great too, but we also get Front 242 and Front by Front. Speaking of sellouts, it's on Wax Tracks, but later came out on Columbia. It gave us Welcome to Paradise and Headhunter, which if you like industrial music, they're pretty big deals. And we got the Happy Mondays first record, Bummed, which gave us Wrote for Luck and kind of kickstarted the Hacienda sound. I remember watching 120 Minutes, and I'm watching this video. I'm like, why is this man dancing in a club and the only other people there are babies? And it's the video for Wrote for Luck, and it's got a really great opening line on it that somebody sent me flowers once and wrote that on the first line, wrote the first line of the song on my flowers, which kind of crushed the song forever for me. But that sort of really got that whole rave Hacienda thing going over here once that broke, because people did not know what to make of the Happy Mondays, and they were white English funk guys, right? Yeah. So it was even weirder. So yeah.
Anything more we need to say about 88?
It's a monster year of monster sounds, some tame, some not tame, people taking lots of leaps. It is very much a transition year. I know you mentioned it was kind of also a hodgepodge, but it's a year where stuff's happening and moving around.
What are people saying after 5 years of Thunder Talk?
It's offensive and unrelatable.
If I had a nickel for every episode Thunder Talk's published in 5 years, I'd maybe have $3.
I'm terrified of their woke agenda.
Their unconventional opinions makes me want to watch sports.
I'm down with it because Mark gets to cuss.
The music is mad cool.
And we have great guests.
I suppose it's not all bad.
Thunder Talk is proudly tolerated by the ESO Network.
All right. Well, that brings 1988 to a close. So we will be back next week with a show. I'll just say that. And until then, Stephanie, why don't you kick us off with where people can find you?
You can find me on Facebook at Stephanie Seymour Music. You can find me on Instagram at there_r_birds. And I have a website, therearebirds.com. And you can find me on Bandcamp under my name, Stephanie Seymour. And of course, on all these streaming platforms like Spotify and stuff like that.
All right, Anthony.
You can also find me on the Watchers in the Fourth Dimension podcast, watching our way through all of Doctor Who from 1963 until now. We are on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and all of those other places wherever you like to get your podcasts. And you can also follow us on social media at Watchers4D on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or X, or whatever the fuck it's called this week.
Right.
And you can also find me personally on Instagram at Englishman in ATL.
Rob, how about you?
So you can find me on Facebook or the Twitter X planetary mess that is, also on Post under my name. And you can find me on the radio on Wednesday nights on KDHX 88.1 FM in St. Louis, streaming at kdhx.org. So you can listen to that on the archive stream whenever you want. It's there for you to listen to whenever. Also, I host a show on Louder Than More Radio on Monday nights from 6 to 8 Greenwich Mean Time. And then that's 1 to 3 Eastern, 12 to 2 Central. It's called Antics. You can listen to that there. And I'm also on the Weekend Justice podcast for neatcoffee.com.
All right. And I've got a website that catches all of my nonsense in one place, and that is Cosmic Creative. kozmiccreative.com. You can find my books. You can find my podcasts. And I don't know, maybe I'll put out a coloring book and you can find that there too. I don't know. So we will be back soon. Hope you'll stick around with us. Until then, take care. Keep rocking on. And we'll see you soon.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.